Everybody remembers the promise. Go to college, get the degree, build a stable life. For decades, that sentence was repeated so many times it stopped sounding like advice and started sounding like the natural order of the world. In 2024, a woman posted a TikTok filmed inside her car after graduating college. She was crying while explaining she had sent out hundreds of job applications and heard almost nothing back. The video exploded online, millions of views, tens of thousands of comments. But not because her story was unusual. The opposite. Thousands of graduates responded saying they were experiencing the exact same thing. Endless applications, ghosted interviews, rejections, silence. One comment underneath simply said, "I thought getting the degree was supposed to be the hard part." That comment alone got over 100,000 likes. And honestly, that might summarize the entire crisis better than any economic report ever could. Because statistically, this generation is more educated than any generation in modern history. More degrees, more certifications, more internships, more networking, more optimization. And somehow, they feel less secure about the future than previous generations did. Think about how bizarre that is. Society pushed millions of people into higher education at the exact moment stability itself started collapsing, and the internet amplified the pressure into something almost psychological. Teenagers now think about personal branding before understanding taxes. Students worry about networking before understanding adulthood. Entire industries emerged around optimizing yourself into employability. Hustle culture became a religion. LinkedIn became emotionally exhausting. Everybody suddenly became a product trying to market themselves to employers. And the craziest part is that this pressure exploded right when the system underneath it started breaking apart. The modern college dream exploded after World War II. In 1944, the GI Bill helped millions of veterans attend university. America needed engineers, scientists, managers, and professionals. College became directly connected to upward mobility. It genuinely transformed lives. In 1970, average tuition at a public university in America cost the equivalent of roughly $3,000 per year in today's money. Today, some universities cost more than that for a single month of attendance. Elite schools can exceed $90,000 annually once housing and expenses are included. $90,000 for 1 year. Imagine explaining that to somebody in 1975. Teenagers now take loans larger than mortgages so they can maybe get an entry-level corporate job. Somehow society normalized this, and universities kept becoming more expensive, even while the internet made information more accessible than ever before. In theory, technology should have made education cheaper. Instead, campuses started turning into luxury resorts, massive gyms, designer dorms, stadiums, gourmet food courts, lazy rivers. Yes, actual lazy rivers. Some universities literally built water parks while students accumulated life-changing debt. At some point, the entire thing stopped feeling like education and started feeling like a luxury subscription service for adulthood. One private university reportedly spent over $100 million upgrading recreational facilities while simultaneously raising tuition again. Imagine borrowing money for 30 years so your campus can have a climbing wall and a smoothie bar. Behind all the beautiful campus tours was a financial system quietly spiraling out of control. Today, around 43 million Americans have student loan debt. Some graduates owe 6 figures before even starting their first full-time job. According to one report, Some borrowers now pay more monthly towards student debt than their parents once paid for mortgages. Just stop and think about that for a second. An entire generation entered adulthood financially damaged before their careers even began. A 2023 financial survey even found that nearly 40% of graduates delayed major life decisions, like marriage or buying homes, because of student debt. Some openly admitted they regret going to college at all. And despite all this, society kept repeating the same promise. Don't worry, you'll make it back later. That promise depended on one assumption: the degree guaranteed stability. But the economy underneath that promise was already changing. In the 1980s and 90s, companies began requiring degrees for jobs that historically never needed them. Administrative work, HR positions, sales, marketing assistants. Suddenly, jobs that once trained employees internally now demanded expensive credentials up front. Economists call this degree inflation, and it created a bizarre cycle. More people got degrees. Degrees became less special, which forced even more people into higher education just to remain competitive. It's basically educational inflation. Imagine if everybody in a city suddenly became a millionaire. Eventually, $1 million stops feeling impressive. That's basically what happened to college degrees, except instead of printing money, society mass-produced credentials. And now millions of graduates are discovering something terrifying. Having a degree no longer automatically separates you from the crowd. In some industries, everybody has one. Meanwhile, online applications transformed hiring into complete chaos. Before the internet, applying for jobs was physically difficult. You printed resumes, you mailed applications, geography limited competition. Today, one LinkedIn posting can receive thousands of applications within hours. Some companies use AI systems to reject candidates before a human even sees their resume. Imagine spending 4 years building a degree only for a machine to eliminate your application in 6 seconds because your keywords weren't optimized correctly. That's not dystopian fiction anymore. That's modern hiring. One graduate on Reddit described applying to over 700 jobs after finishing a computer science degree. 700. Eventually, he got rejected from an unpaid internship because another candidate had more experience. An unpaid internship for beginners. At some point, the entire system starts sounding like satire. Another graduate said she completed 3 separate internships, graduated with honors, and still ended up working retail while sending applications at night from her phone in a parking lot. Meanwhile, companies keep claiming there's a skill shortage. The disconnect between what young people are experiencing and what institutions are saying started becoming impossible to ignore. But somehow, things still managed to get worse, because then came the internship economy. This part of the system feels almost absurd once you notice it. Companies started demanding experience for entry-level jobs, which created a generation of students desperately chasing internships just to qualify for jobs supposedly designed for beginners. Some internships became unpaid. Others required multiple interview stages. There are stories online of students doing 4 separate interviews plus personality tests just to compete for temporary positions, paying barely enough to survive. Imagine being 20 years old, competing against hundreds of people for a temporary unpaid position so you can eventually compete against thousands of people for a low-paying entry-level role. One hiring report even estimated that some entry-level corporate openings receive more than 1,200 applications within the first 48 hours. 1,200 people competing for jobs called junior. Meanwhile, social media keeps showing you 20-year-old startup founders becoming millionaires. No wonder anxiety levels exploded. Previous generations compared themselves to neighbors. Gen Z compares itself to the entire planet every single day. Open Instagram. Somebody your age became a millionaire trading crypto. Open TikTok. Somebody built a startup at 19. Open YouTube. Somebody escaped the system entirely and now works remotely from Bali, explaining how to escape the matrix. Meanwhile, millions of normal young people are quietly panicking behind screens, wondering why adulthood suddenly feels impossible. This is probably why so much online content today revolves around productivity, self-improvement, and optimization. Deep down, people are terrified of falling behind in a system that increasingly feels unstable. A behavioral study from 2023 even found that Gen Z reports higher career anxiety levels than millennials did at the same age. And honestly, that makes complete sense, because then artificial intelligence arrived and poured gasoline onto the entire situation. This is where the story starts feeling genuinely surreal, because many of the exact careers society pushed students toward are suddenly the careers AI threatens first. Writing, coding, graphic design, customer support, marketing, research, data analysis, entry-level white-collar work. In 2023, ChatGPT became the fastest-growing consumer app in history, reaching 100 million users in just 2 months. Suddenly, every tech CEO started talking about automation. Layoffs exploded across the industry, junior hiring slowed down, and thousands of graduates realized something horrifying. They may have spent years preparing for careers that could radically change before their careers even begin. There are already stories of companies replacing junior copywriters with AI tools. Junior developers struggling to find work because companies expect smaller teams. Students openly asking online whether they should even continue studying fields AI may automate. One survey found that nearly 60% of Gen Z workers worry AI could negatively affect their long-term career opportunities. Imagine being 21 years old right now. You're told to choose a career path that determines your future, but nobody can clearly explain which jobs will still exist in 10 years. That level of uncertainty completely changes how people think about education. And you can actually feel this anxiety everywhere online. Every week, there's another headline. AI replaces workers. Graduates struggling to find jobs. Tech companies freeze hiring. Student debt reaches record highs. The atmosphere around adulthood itself started feeling unstable. Even the language changed. Previous generations talked about careers. Gen Z talks about burnout, doom scrolling, side hustles, survival, quiet quitting, digital exhaustion. And the economic numbers behind this shift are brutal. Housing prices massively outpaced wages. Rent consumes huge percentages of income. Inflation made basic living more expensive. Meanwhile, graduates enter adulthood already financially damaged by debt. Some delay marriage, some delay having children, some move back home after graduation despite doing everything correctly. In one survey, over half of Gen Z respondents said they believe college may no longer be worth the cost. That sentence would have sounded almost impossible 20 years ago. But maybe the weirdest part of this entire story is that statistically, college graduates still earn more money on average than non-graduates. That part is true. The problem is, averages hide chaos. A Stanford engineer making $250,000 and an underemployed graduate drowning in debt both count statistically as college graduates. The average hides the emotional reality underneath. For some people, college still completely changes their lives. For others, it feels like a financial trap disguised as opportunity. Two opposite realities now exist at the exact same time. And once that contradiction entered mainstream culture, trust in the system started collapsing fast. You can literally watch this shift happening online in real time. Search interest in trade schools has increased. Young people increasingly discuss alternatives like freelancing, entrepreneurship, and content creation. Some employers like Google and IBM have already dropped degree requirements for certain positions. Even elite universities quietly worry about declining public trust. But maybe the darkest part of all this is psychological, because college stopped being just education years ago. It became identity, status, validation. Parents feel emotionally attached to it because the system worked for them. Teenagers fear disappointing their families if they don't attend. Students tie their self-worth to acceptance letters. Society turned universities into moral symbols of success. That's why conversations around college become so emotional online. People aren't just debating education anymore. They're debating whether the future itself still feels stable. And Gen Z grew up during some of the most psychologically chaotic decades in recent history. Recessions, housing crises, social media addiction, political polarization, climate anxiety, pandemic isolation, technological disruption happening at insane speed. Stability started feeling temporary. The future started feeling blurry. And once an entire generation loses confidence in the system designed to guide them into adulthood, the cultural consequences become enormous. Maybe universities adapt. Maybe AI creates entirely new industries we can't imagine yet. Maybe degrees remain valuable for another century. Or maybe we're watching the early stages of one of the biggest shifts in education since the Industrial Revolution. Nobody really knows yet. But one thing is obvious. For decades, college was sold as the safest path towards stability. But maybe the scariest part of all this is that young people no longer believe stability itself even exists anymore.
Thank you so much for listening to this audiobook. I truly hope these words inspired you, motivated you, and gave you something valuable to take with you into everyday life. If you enjoyed this recording, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and explore my other inspiring audiobooks created to support your growth, mindset, and motivation. Your support means a lot and helps me create more content for listeners like you. See you in the next audiobook.